programa. Vamos a cambiar de sector y vamos a empezar a hablar de otro de los grandes temas, de los grandes focos de innovación. Vamos a hablar de energía, innovación y fuentes alternativas, y para este panel vamos a invitar de nuevo a Jason Pontin para ser moderador. Un aplauso para él, por favor.
I was trapped behind moving furniture. Thank you, Pedro. Welcome to the final panel of this morning. We're going to talk about energy, its opportunities and its challenges for providing scalable, clean energy to the more than 9 billion people who will be alive on the planet in 2050. It's very easy for those of us who are technologists and in love with new technology to believe that the path to renewable energy is simple. That can occur through existing solar or wind technologies and through existing storage technologies. But that's not true. In fact, the only organizations on the planet at the moment who know how to provide energy at scale are the much maligned fossil fuel hydrocarbon companies. So we're going to talk a little bit with them about how energy is distributed to world populations in a sustainable fashion. We're going to begin with Julia Tagüena, the Assistant Director for Scientific Development at CONACYT. Julia.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, pues muchas gracias, encantada de estar aquí. Yo quiero decir que ahora tengo el privilegio de ser la Directora adjunta de Desarrollo Científico de CONACYT, pero mi formación es en el tema de energía. He sido investigadora del Centro de Investigación de Energía por más de 25 años. Hoy ya es el Instituto de Energías Renovables de la UNAM. Les voy a hablar entonces un poco de fuentes renovables de energía y de cómo veo las tecnologías emergentes en México en esta área tan importante para el desarrollo del mundo, ¿no? Quiero empezar por hablar cómo está la situación en el mundo en general, haciendo referencia a lo que es el Energy Technology Perspective de 2014, que nos habla de cómo la política energética y la energía, las tecnologías de energía van a transformar al mundo en los próximos 40 años. Se ha visto cómo la tecnología cambia la forma de vida de la gente. Ciertamente las políticas públicas van a ser muy importantes para ver qué es lo que sucede. La reglamentación, el mercado también van a definir por qué camino nos vamos en el uso de las energías renovables, pero lo que está claro es que sí estamos en un punto en el que tenemos que tomar acciones radicales para realmente irnos hacia las llamadas energías limpias, energías renovables. Sí hemos visto un aumento impresionante, un avance rapidísimo de la energía solar, hidráulica y eólica en los años recientes. Ciertamente el costo de la unidad de energía generada por viento y por solar fotovoltaica ha tenido un cambio impresionante y una caída que va cada vez más en aumento. Ha mejorado la competitividad gracias a los avances tecnológicos. Las economías emergentes se han vuelto líderes. Por ejemplo, China ha verdaderamente invadido el mercado con las celdas solares, los paneles fotovoltaicos. También el gas natural se ve como una solución, pero solamente en el camino hacia la llegada de las energías limpias, y sin duda los fotovoltaicos, y me voy a detener en ese punto en esta pequeña introducción al tema, con una mejora en el almacenamiento de la energía, sin duda abren nuevas posibilidades en el tema de la energía mundial. Aquí vemos una gráfica que es el estimado de las energías renovables. Esto es un estimado del mundo completo. Luego mencionaré un poco cómo es la situación en México para finalmente pasar a un ejemplo específico de fotovoltaicos. Como pueden ver ahí, de todo lo que se produce en energía del mundo, las energías renovables son un 19%, un 2.6%. Todas las renovables juntas, desde luego, que incluye la hidráulica, el 2.6% son energía nuclear y el 78.4% se refiere a todo lo que es de combustibles fósiles, que vienen básicamente del petróleo. La energía renovable se puede dividir en lo que llamamos las modernas y las tradicionales, y luego por supuesto está el gran desarrollo de la biomasa, la geotérmica, la solar, el aprovechamiento del hidrógeno, que no es una fuente de energía, sino una forma de combustible limpio también. Aquí vienen algunos indicadores de energías renovables del mundo, y lo que quiero resaltar aquí no es solamente el aumento de potencia continuos que se ha dado, sino también el aumento impresionante de inversión económica en el mercado de las energías renovables. Sin duda, las energías renovables se han vuelto una fuente muy importante de desarrollo económico, y sobre todo se ve ya un potencial claro de aumento de potencia generada con base en las energías renovables. Esto es un panorama que les he dado del mundo en general, pero sí quisiera mencionar un poco lo de México como una introducción a cómo está la situación en nuestro país. Aquí tenemos la perspectiva de energías renovables que presenta la Secretaría de Energía para el ciclo 2013-2027, y ahí lo que quiere decir posible, probable y probado, hay diferencias desde luego en el significado de las palabras. Probado es que sabemos que tenemos la capacidad técnica y también la capacidad económica, financiera de llevarlo a cabo. En el caso de lo que es la perspectiva probable, quiere decir que tenemos una cierta idea, tenemos indicios de que ahí podríamos explotar, por ejemplo, una fuente geotérmica, tenemos ciertos indicios de que existe, y posible es un paso más, sabemos que ahí ya tenemos ciertos estudios que nos hacen pensar que podemos llegar a que sea finalmente probado. Como pueden ustedes ver, la perspectiva que se está planteando es que las energías renovables van en aumento, muy particularmente ahí tenemos la geotérmica, la mini hidráulica. Ese es un punto importante. Las grandes centrales hidráulicas ya no tenemos tantos lugares en nuestro país donde las podemos poner, además tienen un impacto ecológico muy grande, mientras que la mini hidráulica, en pequeñas hidráulicas en todos los ríos que cubren nuestro territorio, se ve que tiene muchas posibilidades, y ciertamente la solar y la biomasa también nos dan gran posibilidad de desarrollo. Por otro lado, hay muchas formas de mejorar la participación de las energías renovables con mecanismos complementarios, con apoyos fiscales, con incentivos a la generación. Es aquí donde es importante que la política energética vaya apoyando una cierta dirección del desarrollo de las energías renovables. Entonces hay muchas opciones de fomento que nuestro país está tomando, y está tomándolo y es importante que lo tome pronto, porque en el balance energético nacional todavía las energías renovables no forman un paquete tan fundamental. A mí me resulta un poco difícil ver estos pie en forma cuadrada, pero imagínense que esto es una gráfica pie, es la nueva moda, se pone de 10 por 10, cada uno de esos pedazos se podría unir para formar los famosos pie que manejamos normalmente, pero si se dan cuenta, ahí estoy comparando el balance nacional de energía de 2003 y el de 2012, y la parte que corresponde a energías renovables es todavía muy pequeña. Si uno ve el balance energético del año 2012 de México, diríamos, bueno, no se está aprovechando las energías renovables como se pudiera en un país que tiene tanto potencial, por ejemplo, de energía solar, que tenemos tanto potencial de energía eólica en la zona del Istmo, etcétera. Pero las buenas noticias es que sí vamos en esa dirección. Tenemos la ley de cambio climático, que por mandato de la ley estamos esperando que esto es una ley reciente que se generó en 2010, y esperamos que el 35% de la energía eléctrica se logre en este país solamente con energías y de tecnologías limpias. Esto no se limita únicamente a las energías renovables, también podrían entrar la energía nuclear y la no fósil, que tiene captura de CO2, pero ciertamente la mayor fortaleza está en las energías renovables. También la CNR, en su perspectiva de energías renovables, en su planeación, sí plantea un crecimiento cada vez mayor, me gustaría que fuera exponencial, hacia el uso de las energías renovables. Y también el programa de requerimientos de capacidad de la CNR de 2014-2028 se espera que representen el 18.1% del aumento del aporte a la energía total del país. Quisiera aquí mencionar qué está haciendo CONACYT junto con la CENER en este tema, que es la creación de los Centros Mexicanos de Innovación de Energía, CENER CONACYT. Está aquí el maestro Torreblanca, yo esperaría que le preguntaran a él detalles de este gran programa, pero se han creado 3 Centros Mexicanos de Innovación en Energía, CEMIES, del Fondo CONACYT CENER, uno energía eólica, otro energía solar, otro geotérmica. Y realmente estamos muy esperanzados de que con esta propuesta que reúne a todos los investigadores del país que trabajan en estos temas, más apoyo de industrias, más la sociedad en general, porque tiene toda una serie de programas que incluyen a las comunidades, esperamos que se va a dar un cambio dramático en el uso de energías renovables en este país. Entonces tenemos aquí las semillas que van a, digamos, abatir los retos científicos y tecnológicos que tenemos en este momento, y son redes que van a cubrir todo el territorio y que además tienen componente internacional. Y muy rápidamente quiero referirme a las celdas solares, porque es claro que es en los fotovoltaicos donde las energías renovables sin duda están camino a un rompimiento. Aquí hay una referencia que nos dice que realmente es por ese camino donde podemos realmente avanzar. Y aquí tenemos una gráfica un poco complicada, pero que nos explica cómo se ha podido llegar hasta el 40% de eficiencia en alguno de los materiales que se utilizan en las celdas solares. Normalmente estamos acostumbrados a que las celdas solares están hechas de silicio, cristalino o policristalino, y todavía también ya están en el mercado las de teluro de cadmio, pero en la gráfica anterior está claro que tenemos una gran cantidad de posibilidades, y es ahí donde la investigación se vuelve fundamental, la investigación básica, encontrando nuevos materiales, usando nanomateriales, usando materiales orgánicos. Y entonces hay mucha investigación todavía, tenemos absorbedores de celdas solares, en fin, hay toda una serie de grupos en el mundo desarrollando nuevas tecnologías fotovoltaicas, y estoy convencida de que es una tecnología emergente, y también de que en México podemos hacer esas celdas. No nos conviene irnos al silicio, porque el silicio purificado es como una batalla que perdimos en el siglo pasado. Nos conviene mucho más irnos a nuevos materiales donde sí podemos tener un nicho de oportunidad, y realmente tenemos que empezar a producir nosotros nuestros fotovoltaicos, porque puede llegar un momento en el mundo que ya no nos los vendan, porque realmente van a ser tan necesarios que tenemos que volvernos autosuficientes en esa dirección. Yo escribí un libro que se llama La Casa Dorada con un grupo de colaboradores que hablamos de cómo usar las energías renovables en las casas. Y bueno, traje unos cuantos ejemplares que voy a dejar en el stand de CONACYT por si alguien está interesado en tenerlo. Pero cuando uno lee mi libro, se queda un poco con la impresión de que la energía renovable es como una solución individual, como algo que puedo hacer yo en mi casa. Puedo calentar el agua, puedo tener, de hecho yo en mi casa tengo, efectivamente caliento el agua con energía solar, efectivamente tengo electricidad que viene de celdas solares. Y se queda uno con la idea de que es una solución muy pequeña, como para pequeña escala. Pero lo que quiero es dejarles el mensaje de que no es así. Fíjense este proyecto que está en Arizona, este proyecto que se llama el proyecto de agua caliente fotovoltaico, tiene instalado esa cantidad, 290 megawatts instalados, y sirve para cubrir las necesidades de electricidad de 225,000 hogares. O sea, no lo debemos de ver como una solución puntual, como algo que pongo en el techo de mi casa y con eso resuelvo el problema de mi familia, aunque eso también es muy importante, porque hay lugares en este país recóndito donde nunca va a llegar la red eléctrica, y también esa es una cosa importante hacer, pero también podemos irnos a una solución realmente enorme. Tenemos el territorio, tenemos la posibilidad de hacerlo. Yo la verdad me lo imagino en el desierto del norte de México. Me imagino una frontera diferente, una frontera en la que tenemos un montón de concentradores solares, de celdas solares, donde producimos tanto térmico como fotovoltaico, como electricidad, donde cambiamos el panorama de los pueblos que en este momento tienen que emigrar para buscar trabajo. Entonces, creo que la energía renovable puede ser una fuente de trabajo absolutamente fundamental. Entonces, nada más para resumir, porque el reloj se está acercando a mi límite de tiempo, espero haberles transmitido la sensación de que no solamente tenemos que hacerlo porque se acaba el petróleo, porque tenemos el problema del cambio climático, sino que además podemos hacerlo y México puede hacerlo. Tienen los grupos de investigación para hacer celdas solares, es una tecnología probada, es una tecnología que cada vez es más económica, es una tecnología que puede resolver problemas macro, no solamente problemas del techo de una casa, y ciertamente tenemos el territorio para eso, porque la energía renovable muchas veces requiere de muchos metros cuadrados, pero nosotros tenemos en los metros cuadrados, tenemos los grandes desiertos del norte del país. Entonces, aquí hay muchos jóvenes emprendedores, yo espero que ustedes efectivamente se lancen por este camino y cambien el panorama de este país en cuanto al tema de energía. Muchísimas gracias.
Importante cosa.
Julio, let me ask you one question and then we'll invite the other panelists to the stage. Mexican renewables, as you suggested, are very low penetration, 2-point-something%.
Yes.
That's the case all over the world, and the overwhelming reason seems to be one of cost. Advanced renewables are simply still not competitive, except in certain circumstances with cheap natural gas, petroleum, and coal.
I'll keep it.
What's the biggest thing we could use to go and drive down the cost of renewable energy? It's not the component parts, right? Is it different storage technologies? Is it different financing? What moves the needle?
Well, I think that this problem that is very expensive has been changing. The amount of money that you have to pay for a solar cell has gone really to competitive levels. So I think that this used to be the case, is not so much the case anymore, at least in photovoltaics. I think that as in many other issues, I think that basic research has a lot to do.
Yeah.
Because it's really new materials that we have to look for and new ways to do these solar cells, these photovoltaics, if you choose that technology. But it's also the market, you know, it's also political issues, because you can put different taxes, you can promote this sort of technologies in the way that you pay taxes, in the way that you subsidize certain technologies. So I think it's not only a matter of science, it's also a matter of a political decision.
So let me ask about the policy issue very quickly, and then we'll move to the next panelist. Do you believe that to see real uptake of renewables in Mexico, there would need to be some kind of price on carbon, whether a transparent tax or a cap and trade, but something to capture the negative externality of carbon?
Absolutely. I didn't mention that enough, I think, but this, when I talk about the window of opportunities, to include externalities is a very important opportunity. I do believe in a carbon tax, I think, and Mexico has it, actually is working in that direction, but it's also, it's the carbon tax, and it's also the way we deal with the money, because for instance, in Mexico, electricity is subsidized to a certain level. Instead of doing that, we could put solar cells in many houses around Mexico, and then you won't have to subsidize that energy. We do have a law, which is very important, that if you put photovoltaics on the roof, then you can get into the net, into the normal net, and you use your solar electricity during the day, and then there is always an extra that goes to the net.
So it gives back to
the back.
Grid.
So in the night, the company, CFE, gives you the electricity back, and at the end of the month, they do a balance, and they never pay you, but you can finish in zero. So if you put all these photovoltaic panels everywhere, then it's a way to, you know, to get costs down.
That is a much more advanced sort of policies than we have in the state. Let's meet the guy whom Julio wants to tax next.
I do.
Martijn Dekker, who's the Vice President of Appraisal and Hydrocarbon Maturation at Shell. Martijn, come on stage and be taxed.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, and thanks for attending and giving me the opportunity to speak about energy. What do I need? The clicker.
Here.
To talk about energy and specifically about deep water resources and the role of technology. Now, energy is in everything we do and is needed for everything we like to do. And that's why energy security is always a big topic. And for me, actually, it was very personal just 15 minutes ago, because the battery was almost going to go out of my BlackBerry, and I definitely wanted to know what the Dutch team was going to do in that match. So they won. So that's very good. But what it begs the question, what really the question about energy security is there enough energy to meet the world's demand? And even more so, will it be affordable and sustainable? Now, what's key, and what the question that brings up, is the energy industry and is the oil and gas industry doing enough in the area of technology development? Are we developing those transformative, disruptive technologies which will really make sure the world has the energy it needs? Now, in speaking today here in Mexico City, I would be amiss not to recognize the tremendous and historic changes the Mexico energy is going through. With the energy reforms, that begs a lot of questions. There's a lot of excitement, but also probably some anxiety. I mean, what's the impact going to be on Mexico? And for you in the room, what's the impact going to be on technology? What's going to be the impact on technology entrepreneurs, investors? And it's really about what Mexico's place in the world will be, what Mexico's place will be in the world of energy, and what Mexico's place will be in the world of technology. Now, what I love about conferences like these is that we got a wide audience. So we got different companies, technology companies, investors, entrepreneurs, government, academia, and a wide range of technologies represented. We are about biomedical, IT, we're going to hear about wearables, nanotechnology, and that's good, because the world needs all these energies, all these ideas to come together to generate the ideas to deal with the world's problems. So these are some of the themes I want to cover. The security of energy, what that means for Mexico, and the role of collaboration. And really what I want to leave you with, from a Shell perspective, is that with the power of technology, Shell is ready to partner with Mexico, for Mexico to become a leader in deep water. Now, personally, I got some first-hand experience on the role of technology. I've been blessed to be able to work on a couple of Shell's groundbreaking projects in the deep water, here in the Gulf of Mexico on the US side. The Perdido project, just across the border from Mexico, and the Stones project. And what's interesting about those is when I joined the Perdido project, right after they discovered that field, colleagues of mine were telling, what the hell are you getting into? That won't ever work. That won't be possible. Well, what we thought at that time was impossible is normal now. The platform is producing more than 100,000 barrels a day. So while I was working on Perdido, my colleagues down the hall, they work in exploration, so they find no oil. And they found another oil field, the Stones field. And I was thinking, gosh, this Perdido thing is difficult. How are we going to develop this oil field? It may not be possible. Little did I know that a couple of years later, they were asking me, why don't you come up with a plan to develop that field and make it feasible and investment worthy? And I tell you, what I thought was impossible at that time, and we're doing now. We're halfway through building what will be the world's deepest production platform. So I want to cover 3 points, and what I'm going to say next, the technology in Shell and what's our approach to technology, a little bit of the history of deepwater development, what it takes to be successful, and I really focus in on the role of technology. You've got to read as well. There's going to be a test on this later. So a little bit about Shell. I think you know about Shell. We're a large energy company, and we're involved in all aspects of the energy value chain, from the reservoir all the way to the consumer at a gas station. And actually, you may not know that in Mexico, Shell's pretty active too. We're in LNG, liquid natural gas regasification. We provide technical services. And very important, one thing we're doing, we got a Mexico sourcing office where we actually use companies and we access companies in Mexico to provide support and to provide services to our global operations. So that's our business. This is a little bit about the landscape we operate in, where it's getting more challenging to access the resources. There's increased competition, both for those resources, access to cash and people, but also amongst companies, more people entering the field. And there's more societal scrutiny. There's a lot more transparency and we're being held accountable. Now, I don't think that's necessarily unique to our industry. I think it applies to everyone. And what's not unique to our industry either is technology is playing a key role to address some of these things. In finding the technology to unlock these difficult resources, whether it's deep water, unconventionals, or heavy oil, increased competition, being more efficient, and having the technology as differentiator to be better than your competition. And definitely on the societal side, we owe the society to come up with clean, safe, and affordable energy, and technology plays a big role there. Now in Shell, we really believe and truly believe that technology and the people coming up with new ideas is a differentiator to meet the world's energy challenge. So tapping into the potential of the human mind, we will be able to do in 5-10 years what we think is impossible now to make normal in 5-10 years. And if you can, as you can see from the slide, it's not just my words. We are the leading spender in R&D, and we got most of the patents in the energy sector. So next slide shows a couple of examples of technology in action. Our CONACYT development, one of the first big deepwater developments in Malaysia, where we're lifting what you can see there, the biggest facility in the world. It's 23,000 tons, or 1,200 737s. The Stones project, the project I led in my previous job, and we built the world's deepest production system in almost 10,000 feet of water, 3,000 meters, or 40 pyramids of the sun in Teotihuacan stacked up. If you ever walked up that one, you know how big it is. And then Prelude, on the left corner, floating LNG will be the world's first floating LNG facility, which allows us to unlock gas from remote areas that were previously uneconomic. And last on this slide, solar EOR. What would that mean? What does that mean, you may ask? It's actually what we're doing in Oman. We're using the power of the sun to heat water, turn it into steam, inject it in the oil in the ground, which make the oil more viscous and easier to come out of the ground, and that way we get more oil out of existing fields. Because we've got to be very careful and precious with the resource we have. We need to try to get as much as possible out of it. So what's our approach to technology? Now I think we realize that one company will not be enough to come up with all the energy solutions the world needs, and to come up with those solutions at the speed the world needs it. So key to Shell's approach to technology is collaboration, where we work with, where we use both in-house experts, but we also use industry. We got a wide network with academia, innovative companies, individuals via our Game Changer program. And a good example actually for collaboration with academia is where Shell set up a company in Boston called Shell TechWorks, where we'll be able to tap into that very rich, innovative environment around MIT. And we're doing that around the world, where we tap into centers of excellence to get the best solutions. Now let me move to deep water. So why am I talking about deep water, apart from the fact that's maybe the only thing I know anything about? It's because it's critical in meeting the world's energy demand. So you can see from some of the numbers, the potential, the resource in deep water is huge. It's going to be a big part of the energy mix. And it's growing in the world, but it's also very important to Shell. It's one of the growth areas. Now, if you translate that to Mexico, it's also, I think, very important for Mexico. There's huge potential in the Mexican deep waters. And if you see in the Gulf of Mexico on the US side, at the moment we're producing 1.3 million barrels. The potential is at least as big on the Mexican side. So huge potential. And I think what's really good to understand is that potential does not come from the production and the income that will give, But if you think about Houston, or Oslo, Stavanger, Aberdeen, the whole technology network and environment that was built up around the offshore structure and the deepwater development is tremendous. So we will spin off a lot of innovation, jobs, startups, etc. Now in deepwater, there's a long history of pushing the boundary. If you can see from here, started in over 1,000 feet some 25 years ago, and you can see the progression through deeper waters. Now, this shows the deeper water, but we're also drilling deeper into the earth, higher pressures and higher temperatures. I think what you can also see if you're familiar with some of the fields, these are all Gulf of Mexico fields, but it's the US side of the Gulf of Mexico. And I think south of the border in Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, from an oil and gas perspective, is without doubt, it's the Gulf of Pemex. But north, in the US, in the pioneering days of the deep water, it was the Gulf of Shell. So it's a rich history there in where we come from. But this is where we're going. You can see some of the known hardlands for deep water, the Gulf of Mexico, West Africa, Malaysia, Brazil. But all these blue areas, that's where deep water is going. If you listen to Dr. Julio, he talked about mapping the human genome. Well, we in Shell, we've been mapping the genome of the Earth for the last 100 years to find out really where the oil is. And now we're mapping the deep water genome of the Earth, see where is those deep water resources. And this brings new challenges. It doesn't just bring technical challenges of new geographies, new environmental conditions, but it also brings in the non-technical element. What do the regulatory regimes look like? And what are the resources, what are the human resources available? And in fact, that's where the opportunity is. By going global, the deepwater business has a potential to tap into the global talent pool. So these are some pretty pictures of some recent projects. Our Mars B in the Gulf of Mexico came online earlier this year. Already showed the Stones project. Perdido, I'll talk a little bit more, just 10 miles north of the Mexico border. And our project in Brazil, the BC10 project. So let's talk about some of the key technologies that we've been working on that create new opportunities. So first is seismic. And you don't have to word all the slides on the screen. But what seismic is, it allows us to see in the earth. And the technology we actually use to see in the earth is similar to the wizardry you see in movies to really get an understanding of what's happening. And breakthroughs in seismic allowed us, for instance, this Auger field, which is one of Shell's first deepwater fields in the Gulf of Mexico. With better seismic, we're now seeing oil we couldn't see before, and we're bringing that online. And the improvement is like you with your camera. If you got an iPhone 5 right now, 8 megapixels. A couple of years ago, it was like 0.3 megapixels on your little Nokia phone. And maybe the iPhone 6 will have 10 megapixels, who knows. So talk about Perdido. Perdido was an ultra deep water. We hadn't gone there before. And if you think about it being in very deep water, so oil sits in the ground and wants to come up. And typically it's a little bit overpressured, and even with light oil, it's lighter than water, so it will come up on its own. But if you're sitting in deep water, you get it to the seabed, and then there's a big column of water holding it back. So one of the unlocking technologies we developed is artificial lift, basically putting pumps on the seabed. And I actually have a nice video on it, but I'm seeing the clock here, so I'm going to skip that, but you can approach me later if you want to see the video, which shows exactly how that works. Now last, the Stones development, my favorite baby, it's being built right now. So we had all the issues. It was ultra deep water, we had problems with imaging, so seismic was important. It also had very high pressure and temperature, so we had to work with that. And because we did a phased development, we wanted to have a boat. But a boat with 800,000 barrels of oil sitting in it, and we're all here in the Gulf of Mexico, we all know about hurricanes. So that's something we didn't want to do. So we designed a system that actually, when a hurricane comes, we can disconnect and move off. Very important technology which made this field work. So what are the challenges going forward? Where do we need your help? I already mentioned high pressure and temperature. We're going to even deeper reservoirs, up to 20,000 pounds of pressure, up to 400 degrees, 200 degrees centigrade in the reservoir. We need the technologies for that. And we've been doing everything incremental, and maybe there's another way, a better way of doing it. Increased recovery. I told you, resources are precious, so we want to use the oil we found very carefully and make sure we get as much out as we can. So we're developing new technologies by injecting gas, polymers in the ground to get more oil out. Definitely an area of development. Subsalt imaging. I talked about seismic. We can see something, but we can't see enough. We want to see more, so we can see more under our existing fields to make that happen. And lastly, increased reliability, particularly for deep water. If you think something breaks down in your own backyard, you can go out and fix it. If you're 200 to 300 miles offshore, 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters under the waterline, it's a little bit more difficult. So reliability is a big thing for us too. Now, in conclusion, deep water production is critical to meet the world's energy demand. And I got to be honest, deep water is not for the faint of heart. It's tough, and you need to have technology leadership. But even more than just being able to design and build and understand the widgets is how do you integrate it in the overall development of your field. And that's where you need seasoned experts and experience. And even more so, that's where you really need to build very strong and successful partnerships to get the input from all your stakeholders, partners, regulators, academia, industry, to really come up with the best solution. And lastly, obviously, the deep water has got significant potential for Mexico. So thanks again for your time. I mean, some argue that the energy industry, the oil and gas industry, may not be doing enough in transformative, disruptive technologies. So I think, and I hope you agree, that in the area of deep water, the leaps forward we made unlock significant new resources for the world. And this can be very successful for Mexico too. If you think about the energy reforms, we did some analysis. It has the potential to add up to 3% to the annual gross domestic product. Double job creation, up to 2.5 million jobs by 2025. If you're not calling that transformational, I don't know what is. So like the end where I started, is that with the power of technology, Shell's ready to partner with Mexico and with you all to make Mexico a leading deep water player too. Thank you.
So we have a few minutes to talk about the future of energy, but let me begin by very few minutes apparently. We have 4 minutes. Let me throw a quick question out to Martijn. You need to answer it quickly. These deep water platforms are technological marvels, and I don't think anyone would deny they are potentially transformative, but to those outside the fossil fuel industry, it leaves the definite impression that the era of, I won't call it cheap oil, but easy oil is coming to an end. How does Shell balance these competing demands? What does the price per barrel have to be, and how much further does oil prices need to maintain? How much do exploration technologies need to come down in cost to make this a practical future?
No, it's an excellent question, and I think the first one, the era of easy oil was gone 10 years ago.
Yeah.
There's no longer any easy oil. So but what we found is that with technology we keep delaying when oil is no longer economic.
Yeah.
I think from a Shell perspective, we're an energy company. So we're not an oil and gas company. So we look at all alternative energy sources too. So we got to build that mix to address the future energy needs. Whether it's wind energy, where we got a big position, solar, or gas, which may be the kind of bridging fuel to the future.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we got to look at all these sources, but oil is still pretty important. I think a lot what we wear, what we got around us, the plastics, all rely on hydrocarbons, and we definitely need to keep that going. So the technology is very important to keep even oil and gas producing until we got other and better solutions.
So this question is for both of you with the time we have left. Julia said she was attracted to a straight, simple carbon tax. Most economists think it's the most transparent fashion. Carbon taxes are politically difficult in most of the world. Regulations are by no means the best approach to managing carbon, but it's politically possible in a lot of the world. What would a regulatory framework look like that would please you, Julia, and that Shell could live with? No.
Well, I agree absolutely with Martin that we have to look for a combination of solutions. What I think we shouldn't do is to burn the oil because we want to use it for plastic, for women cosmetics, which is very important. So what I think we should be very clever. We should just find the windows of opportunities. And countries are different. We have a lot of sun. For us, solar energy is clearly very important. We are very important in geothermal resources. So I think that this has become more local, and we have to be very clever and combine everything according to the situation of each place. So we have to find a local regulation, something that is not completely spread, but we have to look for our particular problems and how to deal with them.
So what I'm sure Shell would just like some transparency. You know, what should they be managing to over the next 20 to 30 years? Is it a carbon tax? Is it regulations you can live with? What would Shell like policymakers to provide them?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is we can provide our ideas, but in the end the solution is up to the people of the world. But you made the absolute right point. What's most important is that we get a transparent discussion about it, and then it's clear what the rules are.
And on that note, you finished perfectly on time. I lied earlier. There's one more panel on mobility, but I'd like you to thank my panel for their insights and their time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.